If you have something on your premises that a literal child would look at and be curious about, and maybe like they go touch the electric fence without realizing it's an electric fence or something like that, if you were sued, you would lose. So that's why I get all this feedback from new venue owners who will purchase my venue agreement and get mad that it has a provision that says you can't pet any animals you find on the property. It's in there because from a legal perspective, I know about the tort of attractive nuisance. From a venue owner perspective, until you learn it the hard way, you don't necessarily realize that liability actually exists.
Welcome to the Venue RX. On this show, we document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues. What is up, everyone? Jonathan here with the Venue RX, and this show today is going to be one that you're not going to want to miss. You're going to want to listen to it all the way through, and the reason for that is we are talking about some stuff that for a venue owner, for a venue operator, whether you are brand new in this business or you have been around for a while, you're going to want to make sure that you know how to protect yourself legally. You're going to want to know a lot of the nuts and bolts of kind of the legal side. And this is a very serious side of our business. And a business is very fun. You know, it's around parties and weddings and things like that. But we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to protect ourselves. And we're thinking about all of the things. And so I am so excited to welcome to the show, Paige Hulse. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. And you're very generous to say this is a talk people are probably excited for, but I promise this will be a fun side to the law. As fun as we.
Yes. Well, and not only I think for a venue owner, for a venue operator, we're not starting a lightweight business. We're not starting something that you can start up and shut down on a whim. People invest millions of dollars into this. You want to be protected.
Exactly. And that's actually, you're already jumping straight into what I like to tell my venue clients, which is that we don't need to be scared, but we need to be informed. I would argue that you as a professional, as a venue owner, you are the type of professional in your industry that needs to be more informed than most of your peers, because you have a brick and mortar, because you have a different level of liability that occurs when people are actually literally crossing the threshold onto your venue. So all we need to do is the education's out there. We're going to present that today. Apply it in your business, and then you can sleep well at night knowing that you've checked the boxes, because it's not as ambiguous as it might feel.
Totally. And I think today we'll try to, there's going to be no way, like we were saying before we started, that we can tackle everything, but hopefully give you, whether you're listening, whether you're watching, enough of a kind of a smattering of the topics, things that you need to be aware of and you need to be thinking about. And then reaching out to Paige or reaching out to someone, you do need to talk to someone for this portion of your business. And so this is your future self will thank you, if you take this part of your business seriously. So Paige, before we get started, I'm guilty. I love a good origin story. And I want to know how you're a lawyer, obviously, Paige Hulse Law, you work with people all over the country and the world. You said international?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What was the path to lawyer? And then within that, how did you know that you wanted to kind of work with creatives, venue owners? Give me a little bit of how you got into this.
I have maybe arguably, no pun intended, the weirdest origin story for a lawyer. So first of all, I decided when I was 11 that I was going to be an attorney. I didn't know why. I just stuck to my guns, and it became a joke within my family. And my dad, I was raised by a family of entrepreneurs. Ironically, also married into a family of entrepreneurs. When I say a family of entrepreneurs, there's not one person I'm related to that does not own their own company. So I was raised watching, and to be specific, my dad has, if you're familiar at all with the oil and gas industry, which I know most people outside of Texas, Oklahoma are not. You want to talk about being an entrepreneur? That's where, if you want to learn grit, go open an oil and gas company and ask people to invest millions of dollars in drilling a well, and you may get a dry hole or you may get a gusher and make billions off of it. That's true entrepreneurship. That's what I was raised watching. I didn't realize at the time how valuable that was, but I saw I saw my parents putting faith, just leading with faith in every single day. They didn't know if the oil and gas company was going to make it or not. Showed up, smile on their face, continued to work through it. And it was, the story ends well. But they were able to expose us as kids to that type of faith that entrepreneurship requires. And they were also in tandem able to say, we're not missing a family dinner. Literally, not one day of my childhood did my parents miss a family dinner, because my dad said that his first dollars he ever made in business went straight to finding not just the smartest attorney that he could find, but the attorney that can show up and be an advocate for his family on top of his family business. So if something ever came up from a legal perspective for my dad growing up, I just grew up with a very different perspective of the law because my dad would say, well, I'm going to call so-and-so and it'll get taken care of. He's our advocate. And so that's really, I've really attached obviously to that connotation of the law. And then I went to law school and my rose-colored glasses were just thrown off and stomped on in the ground within a couple weeks. To fast forward in the story, I actually was an oil and gas litigator when I graduated. I was one of the first women in the state to do that full, completely only oil and gas litigation, which brought a whole different element of learning how to negotiate, litigate, command respect, not demand respect, all of those types of elements that go alongside business. And what I appreciated most about my clients that I got to work with, I didn't care, if I'm being honest, didn't care about an oil and gas well. I don't care. I had to argue an 11-month case about somebody leaving a piece of pipe in a well bore. That's boring. So I didn't care about oil and gas, but I loved that entrepreneurial grit that I saw in every single client that I had. I, at the same time, again, litigating the week I graduated law, or the week that I passed the bar. It was stressful. No matter how much you love it, it's stressful. So I actually picked up calligraphy as a side hobby. I accidentally turned it into a business. It was that phase of life where seemingly all of my friends were getting married. So I accidentally started making decent money with that calligraphy side business. So I would come home from litigating all day, pick up my calligraphy pen, get to work, made pretty good money with it, and then also started meeting, and then helped with weddings and was meeting all of my, wedding peers and realizing that there was a massive hole in the market. This was 2016 into 2017. There weren't that many attorneys that even knew what a creative entrepreneur was. And so long story short, I continued the calligraphy just long enough I literally used my calligraphy business to fund starting my law firm.
Okay.
So yeah, there you go. Kind of a long story, but like I said, probably the weirdest lawyer origin story you've ever heard.
I love it. Well, there's so many things, and we could totally go a personal route because I'm fascinated with entrepreneurship on more of a macro level, just because I have been in business for myself for the last 12, 13 years, and really had to change from kind of an employee mindset to an entrepreneur mindset. And you were born into that. And just now with my kids, I've got 6 kids, and it's like, how do I expose them to it, but in a way that they're not going to hate it, because it's kind of the thing that took dad away from them. So how do I juggle being a great dad with also being a great businessman? So, I could go that direction. The one thing I just want to briefly touch on that I think is brilliant about your story is you used your side hustle to fund your kind of the future trajectory and everything that you're doing now. And I don't think enough people realize the cost, the sacrifice, the effort. You could have got home from litigating and just been took your shoes off and just said, my gosh, what a stressful day. I mean, I'm sure only woman, oil and gas industry, probably very male dominated industry. You could have just been Chardonnay with the girls and let's just talk crap because this is terrible. You didn't do that. You went back to work. You went back to work on your thing and you build the next thing. And I think that's so admirable. And if you're wanting to start a venue right now and you don't have a venue right now, you might have to go work your day job, look for properties, get it so I just wanted to highlight that and have people hear that. Do you want to add anything to that?
I do want to add one thing. I appreciate you saying that. And I intentionally add that. So in some conversations, I don't specifically say it was calligraphy, but I say that intentionally right now because calligraphy, I was not the world's best calligrapher. It wasn't like a skill set I was born into. It intentionally stretched my mind in a different way. And that was important as well. If I was going to do something that was going to be both that stress relief for my day job, but also fund what was next, I wanted something that could make me, all I knew about entrepreneurship was that it's going to be chaos and I'm going to have to learn. I'm going to have to cultivate leadership, and leadership requires a maneuverable mind. So I need to refine my mind, and I need to just face, I was literally litigating oil and gas cases during the day and then arguing with wedding planners in the evening who drilled holes through my glass seating charts to hang them off the wall and wondered why they shattered. It's learning, intentionally putting myself in positions to have to be humbled and to learn how to be maneuverable. And I hope that anybody listening to me will hold on to this. I hope that I will never be so arrogant with the work that I produce that I'm not willing to go get another job to fund whatever might be next, because that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. I've built something that can last. I've built something I'm very proud of right now. I'm willing to roll the dice. I'm willing to roll all my dice if my gut tells me it's time to roll the dice.
And it sounds like, and you're kind of teasing this, I know this is something that's coming out, maybe you can't tell us everything about it, but you're again, you're iterating again, because you do kind of focus on IP law, but then tell us about some of the other projects you're working on and some of the other businesses you have going.
Yeah, so I practice intellectual property law 80 to 90% of my day. That's what I am, an intellectual property attorney. That's what the type of law that I absolutely love. I again reference my background with oil and gas, because oil and gas law is really just you're writing dense contracts, then you're negotiating 2 words out of them for a year. So I have this contract background that is just an interesting parallel to my intellectual property background. And working with creative entrepreneurs around the world, I've been approached since the month I started my law firm by creative entrepreneurs asking for contracts. Again, entrepreneurial solution to the problem that I identified. I wasn't willing to write contracts all day, every day. I can't practice across state lines. Entrepreneurs, most startups cannot, and I would also argue as an entrepreneur, should not pay me in my hourly rate to draft a contract that I have on my desktop that I can redact a name from. So I created a second company within a month of starting my law firm, which is the Creative Law Shop. By the time this podcast comes out, you're going to see the fruition of me rolling literally all of my dice again, because I have been joking around for about a year that I honestly, Jonathan, if I'm just getting straight to the point, the industry has changed so drastically since COVID. And I know nobody wants to, we don't want to talk about COVID, the pandemic. I litigated mostly venue cases actually, but I litigated so many breach of contract cases that year, and contract templates. You can't create a contract in your heart of hearts if you're actually an integrity-filled attorney. You cannot create a contract that's going to suit every single scenario. It's not possible. And I saw so many business owners trying to do the right thing and then negotiating or editing their own contract incorrectly and literally shooting themselves in the foot when they were in the courtroom. And it absolutely, it literally haunted me. So I was joking that I would find a way to fix that. This past year, I think I did. And I'm betting the house on being right here. I'm turning the shop into an app. So now you're going to be, as a venue owner, you're going to be able to come to the Creative Law Shop and you're going to be able to build your own contract. Because, for example, not to jump too ahead into actual contract law, but I draft my venue agreement in particular to contemplate legal liability that can arise if anyone's even around an animal, around a body of water, even if you don't think that you have a pond on your property, but you're next to a river, like those types of things. And anyways, so this app is going to allow you to draft your own contract. It's going to input the provisions that I won't let you delete. I just know better than allowing someone to delete them. But now you're going to have a document that can be malleable, that you can come in and you can renegotiate per client to fit every single client need per case. And I think that this is going to be invaluable to entrepreneurs and there's going to be a GPT component. So I've saved 7 years of my own questions, like the questions I've received through the Creative Law Shop, and all of my negotiation tips, all of my cease and desist and demand letters I've ever sent. I've trained this GPT, and this is going to be the closest somebody can get to having me across the proverbial desk from them at all times.
Wow. That's so amazing. I can't wait. Just personally, I can't wait to check that out. Like, as someone who operates 6 today and tomorrow going on 9 venues, like, and there's another layer in here, and I don't even want to get into it because there's the management side. So like if you're adding in another component of a mid-level manager, which I know a lot of people are considering nowadays with good reason. But whether you're owner operating, whether you're like, you have to know that you're protected. And it's not just like a guessing game, because we work too hard to,
right.
You know?
And that, sorry to cut you off, but that gap that exists between lawyers and entrepreneurs we can shorten that gap a little bit, because I will argue, you have a duty to be, you have to know what's in your contract. You as a professional need to know what you're asking your client to sign. At the same time, you don't have a law degree. So how can I say that? And then also say, so go argue your indemnification provision perfectly. Like, now, hopefully this will be the tool that will allow you to do that. But it's that meeting in the middle between legal and boots on the ground professional.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. So by the time this comes out, because I know we're 9 or 11 weeks ahead or whatever it is, but we have to get the link for that, or the source for that for people. Because I want people, I've talked to so many entrepreneurs in this space. We live and breathe this with Weeva. And of course, you just came in and we're an educator in that community. But I want that information. So we're going to have it in the description. So check it out. And whether you're on YouTube, podcast, wherever you are, you got to check Paige out, what she's doing with that app. Let's spend the next, 20 minutes or whatever it is that we have today. I want to dive. I kind of want to go in layers, almost like a pool. Let's go from 3 feet to 7 feet or 5 feet or whatever it is, right? And let's kind of say, if someone is an entrepreneur in this space, maybe they've just bought a building, or they've just started construction, and now they're looking at the contract and starting to put in pricing and packages and things like that. And they're at the very, very beginning of this journey, and they're saying, oh, well, we need a contract, or we need some sort of legal help. How soon is too soon, or when is the right time to start working with a lawyer around some of the legal elements of a venue business?
Unsurprisingly, great question. And again, venue owners are unique in what I'm going to say, but you are the business owners that I will tell you need to at least establish a relationship with the lawyer once you purchase that building, or upon, like, congruent with purchasing, whatever word you want to use. You need legal involved sooner than I would say for the average creative entrepreneur. And again, that just goes back to this isn't like something we should be afraid of, but just the reality is you are one of the only types, you would be, that's going to be a dumb statement. You are the only type of wedding professional who is literally allowing, or event professional who is literally allowing invitees to cross the threshold of your building. There is inherently a higher level of liability, so just button it up earlier, because it exists just by purchasing the company or by purchasing the building. And that being said, even with anybody that I write a contract for, I referenced earlier, working across state lines, I've been in court. I've defended my venue contract more than any contract I've ever litigated. ever. I stand fully behind that contract, literally, in a court of law. But I will still say to anybody that ever purchases it, have an attorney in your jurisdiction review it. They probably won't find that much they want to change, but you need to have that introduction, because if God forbid you did have a situation arise, or you're in the wedding industry, let's be blunt, it's emotional. Anytime that emotions meet money, the negotiation takes a different tune. And we just have to embrace that reality. So have somebody that you know that you would call on if you did have a dispute arise. Better to be over-prepared than under-prepared. So that's the first step of that.
I want to ask a follow-up question, because if they can't hire you, let's say, or they're in a different jurisdiction, maybe they're in, because you're located in Texas, correct?
Oklahoma, but I'll let that slide.
Okay. Okay. You're in Oklahoma, admitted in Oklahoma, so you can practice law there. But what are kind of some of the rules around that? Like, do you always, like, could someone talk to you? Where would you defer to someone in their state? Like, what's kind of some of the key things?
Yeah, that's a good question. So most state laws are, okay, let's boil it down. We're talking about property law. Right. We call it, wedding law, we call it creative law, all this stuff. But the law calls it property law. Property laws, let's say 90% of property law is the same across state lines, but each jurisdiction just might have their own little spin on certain elements that might be just like a few words that would need to be added into a contract, for example. So the way that I work with most venue owners across the country is I'll either work in tandem with an attorney in that state, meaning I'm doing the work. The attorney just has to read the agreement and make sure that the attorney in that state has to read the agreement and make sure it aligns with Texas, Colorado, California laws, whatever they may be. And I can have conversations with anybody around the country from an inquiry level. I just can't, somebody from like New York City can't call me and ask me about a New York City law, because I'm not going to.
You can't talk about it. Yeah. Hey there. Wanted to take a quick break and share a little bit about Common Sense Events and the consulting services that we provide. In the past year, Common Sense Events has been able to partner with several venues and provide consulting services around everything from marketing, sales, and operations. We've worked with families, helping smooth out operational hiccups. We've worked with teams to help their marketing departments book more events, and we've worked with sales teams to make sure they're able to have higher converting tours. So if that sounds interesting to you, we would love to have a conversation about that. You can contact us at venues@cseventservices.com. You can honestly just reach out you can also just reach out on the podcast and send us a DM if this is interesting to you. But we would love to talk with you and see if there's a way that we can partner with you and your venue and help make your venue run smoother. All right, back to the show.
The answer.
So yeah, that leads me to another question, and this is just based off of my own experience. We've been in business now, since 2018, where we've been dealing with venues. I've had our venue, so we have two contracts, the contract with the venue owners, and then we have the contract that the venue is having signed with the
outward facing. Yeah,
exactly. I've probably spent $30,000 to $40,000 in legal fees preemptively. We've never had to. There's never been litigation, thankfully, right? Knock on wood, whatever.
Yeah. Careful.
But yeah, it's pretty amazing. But I've spent this money trying to get different law firms or different lawyers to look at the contracts, and I can tell you across the board, unless they have some sort of specialty in property law or something like that, it hasn't been that helpful. And I want to, and this is going to relate to the next question, I promise. But I just want to encourage people, find someone like Paige who has an awareness in property law, because I spent a lot of that hourly time with lawyers explaining what we do and what we're trying to get to.
Exactly.
Yeah. My question for you is, what are some of the things that you would be looking for in a lawyer, and how should someone maybe in New York or Texas or Idaho what should they be looking for in their next door lawyer, maybe after they talk to you and get that initial contract? What should they be looking for?
So they should be, okay, well, quickly just hitting on something that you said a second ago. This is where, like, I don't care how I can be, my job's to be persuasive. I can be persuasive about my expertise in any area. I haven't owned a venue. You will be able to teach me something, and I can guarantee you of that. So find a lawyer that has that type of mentality. And like, just this is my own personal ethos, but I draft a contract. I have the business provisions stacked at the front where I know that the business owner knows better than I do. Like, I know how to write it, but I also know that I know why one venue owner doesn't allow somebody to come in and staple things on the wall because it caused structural damage. You know, those types of things they had to educate me on. The law didn't educate me on. So just find somebody who is willing to actually speak to you who's willing to listen and work with you. This is a partnership. You should be working in tandem with your legal counsel. Aside from that, though, and I think getting more pointedly to your answer to your question, the next step that a venue owner needs to take is they need to work with an attorney. They need to have an attorney at least do an audit of their company and ensure that from an intellectual property and business succession standpoint, like, okay, we've secured the literal house for right now, but how do we build out later on? Or how are we prepared later on? Not if, but when we exit the company. I want any client that ever crosses my doorway to leave being in a position where when they decide to exit their company, whether that be retirement 50 years from now, or whether that be they get a knock on the door next week and they get offered millions for their business, have we done everything possible to make sure that that sale can actually go through if that's what they choose? And or do we have an asset built out that isn't exposing the company to additional liability from an intellectual property standpoint? And then using that intellectual property again from a more strategic, forward-looking focus. And this is the fun side of the law. How can we use the other elements of what you've built to make the company that you have right now more profitable than just your client work can make it right now?
That totally makes sense. I like that you said find someone who kind of has that flexible mind, or that mind that's willing to learn from you. I have found there's a difference between subject matter specific stuff that I knew and the law that I didn't know that they knew.
Right.
You have to be willing. So are there some ways, just as a lawyer yourself, are there some ways that us as clients, if anyone listening or watching this right now is about to approach a lawyer and kind of go through this process, are there some things that they can have already ready to go that will help make that conversation easier and that money, hourly, most likely, better spent?
Exactly. Come in with your any materials, and by materials I mean any documentation that you send a client before they book with you. So whether that be like your proposal or anything like that, that can provide the lawyer with more context regarding the business aspects. And when I say, again, the business aspects, I'm talking about like the packages that you offer, the pricing, the rescheduling policy that you tell the client that you offer. That's a mistake that I see a lot of times outside of, or when people hire attorneys that aren't as familiar with working with venue owners specifically. A lot of times venue owners will have policies in place that don't necessarily align with what the attorney would recommend from a legal standpoint, but the attorney might not even be familiar with the fact that you might send out a client magazine. Like, that's a concept that no one in law school ever talks about. So it's just funny because that's something like I encounter every single day, but that's something a lot of lawyers don't even know to ask for. So anything that the client sees, bring all of those, send the lawyer all of those documents either before the meeting or, in preparation for that initial meeting, so that you're both starting that conversation from a more educated standpoint, and you don't have to retroactively unwind a misinterpretation that they made.
Yeah. And that 30 to 40 grand that I spent is because I'm pretty sure I've made every single mistake in the book in terms of miscommunication, all with the effort, of course, of not wanting to be in in a bad position, but still, I feel like I could have been more expedient. So thank you. That's such a valuable insight.
I literally beg my clients to do that because it will save them thousands and it will save me hours. I beg them. I will end up just drafting a business plan for the client in addition to the contract because they're almost the exact same thing. So awesome. Start there.
Awesome. Let's shift gears a little bit here. Let's say someone has been in business for 5-10 years, right? They've never had any legal issues so far. Maybe they started with 20 weddings a year and kind of floated in the 20 to 30 year weddings per year mark. And maybe they recently brought in a CRM system. They've done some of their accounting in a shoebox. They're just kind of starting to, and they're looking at their contract. It's a nice 1 or 2 pager. They're listening to this and they're going, gosh, I've been meaning to get around to this contract thing for a while. What's the first thing that they should do other than calling a lawyer? Like, where should they be looking? Should they stop booking weddings right away before they give a little bit of you're hitting someone midstream?
No, we never, as much, I'm a lawyer. I don't like to speak in absolute. So as frequently as possible, I will not allow somebody to stop business midway through because you can always renegotiate a contract. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm also saying you should be equipped to be able to do so, willing and able, and literally train yourself in the art of negotiation. And that's a whole other conversation, but be willing and able to renegotiate a contract if you need to. That's a more abstract answer. Tangibly, I want you to go into your contract because if you have a 1 or 2 pager contract, which I do see those, as you can imagine, pretty frequently, that's basically just a more awkward version of your client proposal, and it doesn't really do anything at all from a legal standpoint. And I'm sorry if that doesn't sound very nice, but that's just the truth. That's just the truth of the matter. And in those types of circumstances, I want you, when it comes to venues, anybody in the wedding industry in particular, your termination, rescheduling, those types of elements, those provisions need to be drafted out with just the highest level of precision. Because I know this is what judges don't know, and this is just an insight into what happens on the back end. I can go to court with the most ironclad venue agreement. This happened to me repeatedly in 2020. Most ironclad venue agreement that states everything that we need to about rescheduling, terminations, blah, blah, blah. And the judge, well, this is a very specific story, but the judge one time literally looked at me and said, well, technically, legally, you're right, but this bride has never booked a venue before, so the venue owner had a higher burden of proof of educating the bride and or groom, but it was a bride suing, had a higher burden of proof of educating the bride regarding what terminations actually require. Since that, you never forget a message like that, and since that conversation, I make sure every single person that works with me has a line in their termination agreement, their termination provision that states that in order for a termination or cancellation to be effective, the party has to sign a termination agreement. That would save 80% of the demand letter situations, negotiations that I have to handle for my clients. At least 80%. Wow. So start with that, and that's a simple addition. Other things that usually aren't in the shorter contracts that you really hang your hat on when you need to. Most venue owners are now, I think, post-COVID, familiar with the term force majeure. Do a word search for that. Do a word search for indemnification, limitation of liability, waiver provision, intellectual property. And then also I want venue owners to be thinking about, this is kind of getting a little bit in the weeds, so just tell me to hush up if you need to.
This is the part, the weeds.
This is where, so we've been talking about property law, contract law, but there's an element of tort law that comes into play with venues, which is part of why owning a venue does require legal knowledge at the forefront. Because, for example, I know that there's a tort called attractive nuisance. That means if you have a body of water, or not just a body of water, but that's the most common example. But if you have something on your premises that a literal child would look at and be curious about. And maybe like they go touch the electric fence without realizing it's an electric fence or something like that. If you were sued, you would lose. The law, there's a public policy perspective to the law, and public policy will always protect the invitee, and it will definitely always protect a child or a minor who is an invitee. So that's why I get all this feedback from new venue owners who will purchase my venue agreement and get mad that it has a provision that says you can't pet any animals you find on the property, or go like and doesn't actually say go swimming in the pond, but something like that. It's in there because from a legal perspective, I know about the tort of attractive nuisance. From a venue owner perspective, until you learn it the hard way, you don't necessarily like realize that liability actually exists. So again, do a word search for those legal terms that I referenced. But then just do your own audit of like the property that you have and anything that you like, look around your property and think, what would a kid get themselves into trouble if they went and played around with? Do you have a tractor on your property? Like anything like that, those types of things. We want to just make sure we have language that states that parents are responsible and you have to stay within a certain, range of the venue.
I'm curious. This is just all incredible. And we could just go for hours talking about this stuff because I have all this like real world things that I want to ask about the different properties that we run that I think will be applicable to other people. But I want to ask, how effective is signage posted at the property? How much does that come into play? Like if let's say you do have longhorns on your property and you have an electric fence or something like that, how helpful or protective or from a legal standpoint is signage saying warning, please keep out or something like that?
That's a great question. And here's a little extra like additional weird wrinkle that I can bring into this conversation I didn't say earlier. I live on property and I'm opening an overnight boarding stable. And so I will have a venue for horses, which is just something kind of funny because I have to ask myself those types of questions as well. Because I will have invitees onto my property. And those signs, so most this is where you would talk to an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction, because most counties, and it's a county by county requirement, do have requirements. Like I have to have a specific literal printed sign by my horses once I actually open that up for commerce. And so I would automatically be breaking the law if I did not have those. And if I'm representing, this is where we have to get in the mind of a litigator. If I'm representing you and you have longhorns on your property and you didn't have those signs, then it would be much harder to protect you, not because we're all contingent upon those signs being present, but because the opposing counsel would argue that that's just a literal black and white example of you being a negligent business owner. So ipso facto, of course you didn't run your business correctly. And of course you let, whatever problem occur on your property. Whereas if I'm representing you and you have those signs in place, then I can say, well, it's clear, he had the client sign a contract, contract that covers everything that could possibly be contemplated. And he's also demonstrated visibly that he's done everything possible and as required by law to abide by the law and communicate that clearly and effectively to anyone he's allowing on his property. That's where that's where lawyers get annoying. But that's what actually goes through my mind with that question.
Yeah, no, but that's powerful because you want to create a case. The judge, as far as I can tell, has to kind of look at it each point, but then also holistically, like what is happening. And so that makes total sense.
I joke that things like those signs are like, they're more important character witnesses than they are actual, like the sign itself isn't that important, but it shows that you tried to do the right thing. And then it really is our case.
Okay. That's huge. That's awesome. Okay. So I want to ask, just as kind of we're wrapping up for today. And again, I mean, we're going to have you, once you release everything, the next business that you're doing and all of that. We're going to have you back on because there needs to be a part 2 and probably part 3 of this. But I'm curious with how AI has changed the landscape in our language, the copy that we write on social media and websites and things like that. Can you give me a little bit of the impact that AI has had on the legal field, specifically with writing contracts maybe, or rules and regulations and things like that?
So the legal field is a dumpster fire and everything's on fire and nobody knows where to turn. No, I'm being sarcastic. Okay, so when talking about AI legality, let's make it a two-pronged issue. We have contract questions that arise. We have intellectual property questions that arise. I do want to hit on the intellectual property questions here in a second, because that's something when thinking about ways that you can not just build your venue, but build your legacy with your venue. I do want to hit on something there. But AI, as it pertains to contracts, venue owners so right now I'm recommending to all of my clients that they include an AI disclaimer in their client agreement. This is where I have templated language, because it's not something that I think that you always need to require. And I know I sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but for example, I have a photography client that her clients just asked that she disclose whether or not she uses AI to distort an image. We had to have the conversation together of whether or not her using Photoshop to smooth out lines in a dress, or literally edit out somebody sneezing behind a bridal portrait, constituted the use of AI. So that's where there isn't much case law yet, and it's very murky. But we can be much more myopic than that. Let's look at it from a business owner perspective. As long as your client does not feel like they've been misled by anything that you're doing related to AI, or, I don't know how to phrase that correctly, but you know what I mean. As long as your client doesn't feel like they've been misled in any way, and as long as at the end of the day, there is a meeting of the minds, which that is, if you boil down the definition of a contract, it is a legal meeting of the minds. So as long as both parties still are agreeing to the same thing, then it's completely fine. What I'm getting at is when it comes to venue owners in particular, first, do not use one of the AI tools that's out there that just lets Chat GPT or whatever tool draft a contract for you. Because unless an attorney is actually drafting on the back end, which is why I'm launching the app I'm launching, it's literally my own language. Unless you have an attorney doing that on the back end, it's making up stuff. It's not going to hit all of the points. And there are a lot of lawsuits going on around that point. When it comes to misrepresentations, or again, a failure of the meeting of the minds, this is a really, I think, baseline or basic point, but make sure that you're not using AI generated imagery to advertise your venue or something, again, very obvious. I want to give everybody listening the benefit of the doubt that they're not doing, but those are the types of things that...
Because that would be misleading, right?
Right.
Because it's a generated image and it's not an actual image of their property.
Right. If it's, I have seen one case, I didn't take it on, but I have seen one case where somebody did that, and they used AI to create these beautiful, beautiful photos of their actual venue, but a beautiful tree line behind the venue and light pouring in through the windows and all this stuff. And really, in reality, the venue was a pretty dilapidated building that had a trash pile behind it. And obviously, this was a unique case where in that case, it was an out-of-state couple who had seen those photos, and that's why they had signed a contract before actually visiting the venue. Because I don't think that there are that many scenarios in the venue world where that was kind of a perfect storm of honestly stupid events on both sides.
Yeah. Pardon the interruption. I wanted to take a moment and share with you about WEVA. WEVA stands for Wedding and Event Venue Association, and it is a professional association custom built for venue owners and operators. We felt like there was a lack of resources, community, education, and networking available specifically for our industry, And so we recently started this association, and it's been growing by the day. We would love to extend an invite to you, so please click the link in the description or wherever you're watching this video, and we would love to welcome you into the community. And see if you're in lack of proof.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, those are the types of things I would just caution people with.
Okay. And I know we're going to get to the IP in just a second, but so it sounds like what you're really paying a lawyer for is not necessarily writing the words, because the words, you can get any lawyer to write them, but it's knowing which words to write and which words specifically for your venue. So AI, you can type into ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever it is, like, write me a contract for my wedding venue, even providing some specific descriptions of the venue, but you're not going to be covered because you haven't had that discussion around all of the things that are going to be required, even if you do have. So if anyone, I know people are creating contracts on ChatGPT.
I don't care. That terrifies me so much.
Well, it's guaranteed it's happening, right? Take that thing to a lawyer, spend the money, and be like, "Hey, look, this is what I did. We need to get this fixed," and then they can help you get it. But do yourself that favor.
Exactly. I can get an entire contract thrown out in court if it's missing like 3 words from a limitation of liability paragraph, or if it's missing a severability paragraph, then we're golden. I can get the whole thing thrown out. Dang.
So there you go. Just better hope that if you have used that you don't have Paige litigating against you, because she's going to crush it.
I'll just like, come on, guys.
Oh no. Okay. Let's talk IP and then we'll wrap for today. So, what do you mean by IP? I mean, I know we did a little bit of this in the Weeva education seminar, and I was the whole time, I mean, I wasn't even able to be on, but I'm like in the car listening, like, oh my gosh, I love this. What is IP in the venue space? Like, what does that even mean?
Okay. So IP being intellectual property are the tangible assets that a business creates just by operating. So trademark, we have 3 different forms of intellectual property. We have trademarks, which are your business name, logo, or slogan. We have copyrights, which is anything tangible that the venue creates or the business creates. And then we have patents, which are inventions, which I won't really talk about because those aren't as, like, no one's inventing a venue. Not as pertinent for this conversation. But when it comes to, again, going back to our conversation with AI, when it comes to copyrights in particular, if you're building a venue in particular, or if you are, revamping or adding onto an existing or remodeling an existing building, don't rely solely upon AI to draft the architectural designs or something like that, because the architectural designs are an asset that you can copyright, and then it goes from an intangible to a tangible asset. Once it's a tangible asset, that becomes something that somebody like myself comes in and says, okay, we can license this out. And that one venue that you have with that one floor plan that you created, we can license that out for $20,000 per license to whomever wants to build a venue, with whatever stipulations go along with that license in any state that you want. Whatever you want to negotiate there, we can make money off of it. If you create it solely based on AI, right now the Copyright Office, my bad joke earlier about the legal field being a dumpster fire, the Copyright Office literally does not know what to do with AI right now. So it's very, very hard to copyright anything that is comprised of AI. I'll say, just generally speaking. And then from a trademark perspective as well, that's another area that you can monetize the intellectual property of your company as well. If you have a slogan, or if you have a logo, if you want to franchise the company into multiple states, whatever, there's so many opportunities at play. And this is, again, why I say this is the only area of law that's a fun area of law, because this is where we can take something that you've built and it's a seed that we can grow into a tree. And so there are so many opportunities there, but you have to own it in order to be able to do that.
Makes total sense. Makes total sense. I think later on we should talk about like the process to go through that and all of that. And I mean, that was something that was covered. All that recording stuff is available inside Weeva. And just shameless plug of that association. But really, like that's what it's. I mean, it's a professional association for venue owners, so we want people to be in there. But I realized there's one thing that I wanted to ask you about. It's a little bit of a different subject. You mentioned before we even started recording about kind of some newer laws and things that came out recently in the last couple of weeks. I'm wondering, was any of them the non-compete about the labor?
Oh, that's a great question. So that is one that so I'm not an employment attorney, first of all, I'll say, so I'm not going to like speak directly to that law. Yeah. But one thing, I did receive a lot of questions around that ban. And I think a lot of people were disgruntled by my response, but I said, I don't care. Like I don't care, because anytime I've ever litigated a case where a non-compete was one of the issues, it was just that. It was one of the issues. This is why, as business owners, we have to think so strategically. Like we have to see the back door, we have to see the front door, we have to see the windows, we have to see the chimney in terms of how to attack a problem that we're faced with. So what I mean by that is, with that non-compete ban, I personally have never seen one. I haven't litigated that many of them, so I don't want to be like overly, I don't want to, be self-aggrandizing in that way. I've never seen a non-compete personally hold up in court, because we've talked about public policy in this conversation already. State law is based on public policy to a certain extent. States want to promote commerce, especially in a year where the economy is down, and in an election year, you literally couldn't, but you couldn't pay me to take a non-compete case to court, because the judge is going to want to promote commerce within the state. There's a human element to the law that we have to think about in this way. So when it comes to the non-compete ban, what I'm just reiterating to clients is, if you were in a position where you were going to have to take legal action based on somebody working for you and taking some of your, skill, knowledge, know-how, intellectual property, which has happened to me as well. This isn't like, I'm not just sitting up on a throne looking down at businesses here. But this is why you can see behind me all of the trademarks that I have behind me. I've registered any piece of intellectual property I have, because if I had to take action against somebody in that way, I would base it as an intellectual property infringement claim. And I would maybe add in prior to that ban occurring, maybe add in a non-compete as an ancillary issue, but it would literally be like my fourth claim in the contract or in the lawsuit. So there are ways. It's not going to derail your business. This is just, you have to work with a strategist to have multiple areas, multiple methods of protection in place.
Yeah. And it's based on what it sounds like. It sounds like, especially if you do have a venue management company like we do, or if you have like a planning service or a catering company that also operates venues, and there's that opportunity, you definitely need, because it adds a new dynamic and a new kind of dimension. That's the word I'm looking for to the conversation. So, wow, this has been great. This has been so great. Is there anything you want to just wrap up and say that you wanted to say that, we got carried away on other stuff? I mean, I know that's broad, but just kind of like, there's a whole other element of intellectual property that you can don't tempt me with a good time. I can talk about that for a while. I do want to, though, I was dealing with a case this morning with a venue owner that did pertain to a termination or a rescheduling complaint that occurred that is now turning into a full-bore demand letter scenario. But this is, again, if somebody takes one thing away from our conversation about contracts and all of that today, truly, please, please, please draft in or have an attorney or go to the creative law shop and find our termination provision and have that requirement that in order for a contract to be terminated or rescheduled, the parties have to sign a termination agreement. Because that would say, the person I talked to this morning,
it would have, she's probably going to end up in a $20,000 lawsuit, and it could have been wrapped up in like maybe $1,000 of just like a letter or two being sent. And it's just crazy. No matter how long I do this, it's crazy to see the tangible effects of one sentence missing from a contract like that. So just clients these days, and I mean these days literally post-pandemic, are different, and they are very truly just more aware of the fact that things can go wrong in the wedding planning process and events can be canceled. And there's a naivety that we did not realize we were dealing with pre-2020 that has been stripped, and we need to level up as a professional industry.
Yeah. I love that. Paige, thank you so much for coming on today. This has just been incredible. I've learned so much. I know others have as well. I know we're going to get the links for the new app that you have launching and that. So we'll have that for folks. Outside of that, if people want to talk with you, whether they're in your state or not, and they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah. So you can reach me at hello@paigehulse.com or go through my website, which is paigehulselaw.com. I got really creative when I named my law firm. But if you go through there, then I have a great team that helps make sure I'm not missing an email or something like that. But that my law firm is where any one-on-one conversations regarding anything we've talked about today or intellectual property strategy, anything like that, can be found.
Amazing. And Hulse, Hulse.
That's right.
Awesome. For any of our audio folks. Okay. Beautiful. Thanks again. This was wonderful. This was so cool to have you on.
Absolutely. I really, really enjoyed getting to talk to you.
Hey friends, Jonathan here, and I wanted to share about Common Sense Events consulting packages. If you are a venue owner and you're struggling with your marketing, your sales, your operations, or maybe there's just, you're new to the industry and you want to really have a leg up and get a jump start on getting your business going and not make a lot of the mistakes that oftentimes people make, the mistakes that we made, frankly, when we first started, we would love to chat with you and see if there's a way that we can serve you. Our team has experience working with over 10 venues all across the United States, doing consulting. We've hosted hundreds and hundreds of weddings at this point, and we know what it takes to be successful. If this sounds interesting to you, we would love to chat with you. You can either reach out by filling out the link in the description of the video or podcast, or you can just email us at venues@cseventservices.com, and we would love to chat with you and see if there's a way that we can serve you. All right, back to the show.